Let me tell you something dangerous. Not everyone who is smiling at you is comfortable with your anointing. Because when God marks you, it disturbs the atmosphere. You don't even need to speak. Your presence alone shakes demons in rooms you didn't even know were infected. This message is not for the casual believer. This is for the dangerously anointed, the ones God set apart not for comfort, but for calling. And if you see these 7 signs, you're not just chosen, you're on a collision course with purpose. You become a threat without trying. You become a threat without trying. You don't have to force it, fake it, or fabricate it. Your very existence makes people uncomfortable. You walk into rooms and people who've never had a problem with each other suddenly feel divided, not because you said anything, not because you did anything, but because something on your life confronts what's hidden in theirs. You see, when you are dangerously anointed, your presence is prophetic. It speaks louder than your words. You start to notice that people shift around you, conversations change when you walk in, and some folks start to avoid you for no clear reason. What's happening? The anointing disrupts comfort zones. You don't fit in because you weren't made to blend in. You weren't designed to be another face in the crowd. You were designed to confront systems, shift atmospheres, and bring divine order into chaos. And because of that, people who are out of alignment feel convicted by your discipline, your focus, and your fire. Your refusal to gossip threatens the ones who feed off of drama. Your quiet confidence makes insecure people itch. Your peace disturbs those who thrive in confusion. And it's not personal, it's spiritual. Have you ever noticed how people treat you differently even before they know your name? That's not just social awkwardness. That's spiritual resistance. That's the oil on your life speaking up before your mouth ever opens. Sometimes your glow makes people aware of their own shadows, and rather than deal with their darkness, they'd rather dim your light. You walk with integrity, and it convicts those who have compromised. You speak truth, and it slices through the noise like a blade. You don't just show up, you shift the dynamic. Think about it. Even in your job, you may be the quiet one, the focused one, the one who minds your business, but they keep watching you. They keep gossiping. They keep trying to find fault in you. Why? Because your excellence exposes their excuses. Your consistency puts pressure on their complacency. You're not a threat because you're loud. You're a threat because you're effective. You show up on time. You stay late. You handle pressure with grace. You don't talk bad about others to rise. You just rise. And it frustrates those who built their success on shortcuts. Sometimes the anointing doesn't announce itself with miracles. It announces itself with resistance. You begin to notice that people you helped start resenting you. People you supported start competing with you. The same people who once clapped for you are now whispering behind your back. That's not just life, that's the mark of the mantle. The same oil that attracts favor also attracts friction. Because wherever there is anointing, there is agitation. Heaven has identified you and hell has taken notice. And here's the part most people don't talk about. When you are dangerously anointed, you won't always be liked. In fact, the anointing may cause you to walk alone in seasons where you thought you'd be celebrated. Don't take it as rejection, take it as redirection. When people fall off without warning, it's usually because your calling offended their comfort. God is not isolating you to punish you. He's separating you to protect the oil. Look at your life. How many times have you downplayed your gifts to make others feel safe? How many times have you muted your brilliance so you wouldn't be misunderstood? How many times have you wrestled with guilt because others couldn't handle your growth? Listen, you were not called to fit their expectations. You were called to break generational limitations. And sometimes that makes you a threat to people who are content with average. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to explain why they don't like you. The anointing speaks before you do. You just keep moving in excellence. Keep showing up with character. Keep letting your fruit speak louder than their fiction. The real ones will recognize the oil. The right ones will honor the weight. And the wrong ones will remove themselves without you having to lift a finger. So if you're wondering why it feels like your circle got smaller, your support grew silent, or your favor seems to offend, congratulations. That's a sign you're walking in something real, something weighty, something dangerous. You've tapped into your divine assignment, and your life has become a threat to anything that wants to keep people bound. You didn't ask for this. You didn't campaign for this, but heaven trusted you with it. And now, without trying, you're exposing what's fake, confronting what's broken, and shaking things up just by being who God made you to be. Isolation becomes a pattern, isolation becomes a pattern, not because you're antisocial, not because you're unfriendly, but because the weight of your calling starts demanding separation. At first, it feels confusing. Friends you once laughed with suddenly don't call as much, invites dry up, group chats go silent, and even family members start misunderstanding your silence. You check your phone wondering, did I do something wrong? No, you didn't. You did something and grew. You matured. You started walking in awareness, in purpose, in a divine identity, and that identity started making your old environments too small to carry you. See, when you're dangerously anointed, isolation is not punishment, it's positioning. It's divine separation. God pulls you out not to abandon you, but to prepare you, because the next level of your calling cannot be built in the noise. Clarity comes in quiet places, and purpose grows in hidden seasons. Think about it. When seeds are planted, they are placed beneath the surface. No spotlight, no attention, just darkness, pressure, and time. But eventually, they break through, not because someone clapped, but because they were called. That's what your isolation is, a calling in disguise. It's the classroom God uses to shape the dangerously anointed. When you're isolated, your distractions get stripped, your dependencies are revealed, your inner world gets louder. You start noticing what you actually think, what you really believe, what you've been running from in the noise of other people's validation. And here's the truth: when you've been called to carry something heavy, God doesn't allow your identity to be formed in the crowd. He forms it in the cave. Isolation is where you find out what's in you when there's nobody clapping, nobody liking, nobody texting. It's where you learn how to pray deeper, think clearer, hear sharper. In the isolation, you don't just find purpose, you find power. You stop needing permission to be authentic. You stop shrinking to fit comfort zones. You stop performing to keep approval. You stop giving your energy to what doesn't grow you. And people will say, "You've changed." Yes, you have. You had to. Have you ever walked through a season where you were in rooms full of people and still felt alone? That's not loneliness, that's awareness. You started to see differently, talk differently, expect differently. You began craving real conversations, deeper connections, higher standards, and suddenly the shallow spaces didn't feed you anymore. That's how the anointing works. It elevates your appetite, it disrupts the normal, it rewires your soul, and as a result, you start outgrowing people, places, and patterns that once felt like home. At your job, you begin to notice the gossip doesn't hit the same. The lunchroom chatter feels empty. The Friday night invites feel draining. Why? Because your spirit is evolving. You're not better than them. You're just becoming more you. And becoming more of who you were created to be often means walking away from who you had to be to survive. That version of you that kept the peace just to be included, the version that lowered your volume just to be accepted, the version that tolerated nonsense just to avoid confrontation, that version can't come where you're going. So God allows isolation because when the noise stops, you begin to hear yourself. You begin to confront the buried pain, the dormant dreams, the neglected voice within. And in that space, your confidence isn't built by compliments. It's built by confrontation, confronting your patterns, your cycles. That's how the dangerously anointed are forged. In quiet battles nobody sees. In prayers nobody hears. In decisions nobody claps for. But the results will be impossible to ignore. You start making daily choices that don't make sense to everyone else. You're not at every party, not in every conversation, not showing up where you're expected. People say you're acting strange, but you're not acting. You're aligning. You're guarding your peace. You're protecting your energy. You're building stamina for the weight you were born to carry. Because when you are dangerously anointed, your solitude becomes sacred. You stop seeing isolation as rejection. You recognize it as preparation. Even Jesus had to withdraw to lonely places to recharge and recalibrate. And if he had to protect his focus to fulfill his mission, so do you. Your assignment requires a version of you that is undistracted, unoffended, and undeterred by popularity contests. You begin to understand that peace is more valuable than proximity. That discernment is more important than access. That silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. The dangerously anointed don't chase crowds. They build altars. They don't seek noise, they seek clarity. They don't cling to every connection, they honor alignment. So if you find yourself in a season where you feel misunderstood, overlooked, or set apart, don't resist it. This is where the oil flows. This is where the mantle matures. This is where you stop performing and start becoming. You're not being forgotten. You're being formed. You're not invisible. You're invincible in training. And everything you're learning in this quiet season is preparing you to be unshakable in your public one. You experience unusual attacks. You experience unusual attacks. Not the kind that makes sense, not the kind that come with warning signs or fair explanations. No, these attacks are strange. You're walking in obedience, staying in your lane, minding your business, and suddenly all hell breaks loose. People start misjudging you. Opportunities that were promised fall apart. Your name ends up in conversations you never signed up for. Have you ever had moments where it felt like everything was going wrong, not because you were doing something wrong, but because you were doing something right? That's what happens when you're dangerously anointed. The attack doesn't show up because of who you were. It shows up because of who you're becoming. The enemy doesn't waste bullets on empty threats. He fires at those who carry purpose. And when God marks you, hell doesn't sit still. Your spiritual fingerprint starts unlocking doors you didn't even knock on, and in the same moment, it triggers alarms in places you didn't know existed. You're attacked because you're activated. Look at your life. Have you ever had a week where everything looked fine on the outside, but inside you were wrestling with thoughts that didn't even feel like your own? You're suddenly anxious for no reason. You're waking up in the middle of the night feeling heavy. You're surrounded by people, but you feel alone. You're trying to move forward. An invisible resistance keeps pulling at your soul. That's not random. That's a sign. The anointing on your life is stirring a war in the unseen realm. And what makes it more frustrating is that sometimes the people attacking you don't even realize they're being used. That coworker who keeps sabotaging your work. That family member who keeps speaking doubt over your dream. That friend who keeps throwing shade disguised as advice. These aren't just personal problems, they're spiritual indicators. The devil often uses familiar faces to launch unfamiliar weapons. But don't get distracted by the person, see the pattern. The attack is bigger than them. It's targeting your momentum. Have you ever noticed that when you're just about to make a breakthrough, chaos intensifies? Just when you're about to launch the business, something breaks at home. Just when you decide to heal, someone from your past shows up to trigger your wounds. Just when you commit to becoming consistent, distractions increase. That's because hell doesn't mind when you talk about purpose. It panics when you walk in it. So it launches attacks not just to stop you, but to shake you, to make you second-guess your progress, to tempt you to go back to what's familiar because forward feels too costly. But here's the truth. The presence of a fight doesn't mean you're failing. It often means you're functioning. You're doing something right. And while the world teaches you to pray for peace without pressure, God trains you to carry peace inside pressure. You learn to walk through fire without smelling like smoke. You learn to stand in storms without bending. You learn to keep your vision sharp even when arrows are flying from every direction. Think of it like this. No one robs an empty house. Thieves target places with value, and the same is true spiritually. The enemy doesn't attack people with no influence, no vision, no power. He targets the dangerously anointed, the ones who carry answers, who shift atmospheres, who break cycles. So the next time you face a strange battle, ask yourself, what am I carrying that has held this nervous? Because that's exactly what the attack is about. The anointing you carry, the breakthrough you're about to walk into, the lives you're about to impact, the territory you're about to claim. Sometimes the enemy can see more clearly where you're going than you can. That's why the attacks feel premature. That's why the warfare feels unfair. He's not attacking where you are, he's attacking where you're headed. And when you realize that, everything shifts. You stop crying over what left. You stop complaining about the pressure. You stop begging for normal. You were never called to be normal. You were called to shake nations. And that kind of call attracts opposition. So don't let the attacks make you bitter. Let them make you bolder. Let them refine you. Let them clarify who you are. Because when you're dangerously anointed, even the attack is a compliment. It's confirmation that you carry something rare, that your name is echoing in places your feet haven't stepped yet, that your obedience is shaking foundations, that your presence is challenging powers and principalities that have been comfortable for too long. Think back to that moment at work when someone lied on you and you had no way to defend yourself, but somehow the truth came out and your promotion still showed up. That wasn't just good luck. That was divine backing. Think about the time your health was under siege, your mind felt fragile, your heart was exhausted, but you kept showing up, and now you're stronger, wiser, sharper than ever. You didn't just survive the attack, you got upgraded in it. The fire didn't burn you, it branded you. And that's how it works when you're dangerously anointed. The attack may be unusual, but so is your assignment. The warfare may be strange, but so is the oil on your life. You're not here to live safe, you're here to live sent. And with that kind of calling, don't expect the path to be paved with comfort. Expect it to be marked by glory, because what's on your life is too powerful to go unchallenged. You're drawn to purpose over popularity. You're drawn to purpose over popularity. There's something inside you that no longer gets excited by attention alone. You used to crave the spotlight, the applause, the validation, and let's be honest, who doesn't enjoy feeling seen? But lately, something shifted. Now, when people clap for you and it's not aligned with your calling, it feels empty. You've tasted something deeper. You've tasted purpose. And once you've tasted purpose, popularity becomes noise. You start walking differently. Not because you think you're better, but because you know you're different. You're not moved by trends. You're guided by truth. You're not motivated by approval. You're driven by assignment. You're not interested in being seen for the sake of being seen. You want to be effective because you've realized something powerful. There are many people who are famous, but not fruitful. Loud, but not lasting, visible, but not valuable to the kingdom. And you've made a decision, I don't want to just impress people, I want to impact lives. That's when your discernment begins to sharpen. The events that used to excite you now feel draining. The crowds that used to validate you now feel distracting. The conversations that used to entertain you now feel empty. You're not trying to be deep, you're trying to be real. And real doesn't always trend. Real doesn't always go viral. real doesn't always get invited, but real leaves a mark that can't be erased. And that's the kind of legacy you want. You're not chasing followers, you're chasing fruit. Look at your schedule lately. Isn't it shifting? You're saying now more. You're turning down opportunities that look good on paper, but feel off in your spirit. You're deleting contacts that only drain your focus. You're guarding your energy like it's sacred, because it is. You're not chasing platforms anymore. You're building purpose. And people don't always understand it. They say you're distant. They say you've changed. And you have. You've changed from popularity, driven to purpose, focused. You've shifted from public applause to private alignment. Because purpose will always demand privacy before it leads to promotion. You begin to learn that the most dangerous thing you can do is succeed at something that doesn't matter. And so you check yourself. You ask the hard questions. Am I doing this because it's right? Or because it's popular? Am I showing up for impact or for image? Is this feeding my purpose or feeding my ego? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary when you're dangerously anointed, because you're not just building a life, you're building a legacy. And legacy is born in intentionality. You begin to notice that the people you admire the most aren't always the loudest. They're the most consistent. They're not performing for likes. They're living for purpose. They don't need to broadcast every move. They know the real work happens in the dark. They don't need crowds to feel significant. They found their significance in their assignment, and that becomes your standard too. You start living with intentional silence, strategic movement, private victories. Even in your job, things begin to shift. You no longer work just to get promoted. You work to bring purpose into every task. Whether you're cleaning a floor, leading a team, or launching a brand, you do it with excellence because you know who you're doing it for. Excellence becomes your identity, not just a performance. You start understanding that your name carries weight, and everywhere you step, you leave fingerprints of purpose. And here's the wild part. The more you pursue purpose, the more popularity tries to chase you again. But now, you're different. You've trained yourself not to be seduced by the spotlight. You've seen what fame without foundation looks like. You've watched influencers lose themselves to crowds they never even respected. You've seen how people will praise you today and crucify you tomorrow. So instead of feeding your ego, you feed your character. You develop discipline, boundaries, consistency. You stop reacting to noise. You respond to purpose. Have you ever noticed how some of the most impactful people barely speak, but when they do, everyone listens? That's because they've spent time in the shadows developing substance. That's your calling too. You're not here to be famous. You're here to be faithful. You're not here to entertain. You're here to equip. You're not here to impress. You're here to ignite. And that realization sets you free. You no longer need everyone to understand you. You just need to obey the call on your life. You start spending your mornings differently. Instead of reaching for your phone to check likes, you reach for your journal to check your vision. Instead of scrolling social media for dopamine, you meditate in silence and realign with your purpose. You stop asking, who saw me today? And start asking, who did I serve today? Because purpose is no longer a side goal. It's your lifestyle. It's your compass. It's your code. And the most beautiful thing happens. Peace follows. Real peace. The kind of peace that popularity could never give you. The kind of peace that fills your soul even when no one's watching. The kind of peace that whispers, you're on track, even when your progress doesn't look impressive. That's the evidence of a dangerously anointed life, a peace that surpasses performance. Because when you're drawn to purpose over popularity, you're no longer a slave to applause. You're a servant of destiny. Your words carry unusual weight. Your words carry unusual weight. You've noticed it. You can't deny it. When you speak, things shift. You may not always realize it, but people listen differently when you talk. Your voice carries something more than information. It carries authority, not the kind of authority that comes from a title, a position, or a degree. It's the kind of authority that comes from alignment with your assignment. There's oil on your voice. There's weight behind your words. And that weight isn't random. It's spiritual. It's divine. It's a sign that you are dangerously anointed. Have you ever said something in passing only to find out later that it impacted someone's entire week? You didn't plan it. You didn't prepare it. You weren't even trying to be deep. But what came out of your mouth pierced through their confusion like a sword. That's not just communication. That's confirmation. You're carrying something on your tongue that breaks yokes, opens eyes, and reorders atmospheres. You're not just talking, you're transforming. Even in casual conversations, people pause when you speak. You might be joking around, telling a story or offering advice, but something about your tone makes people lean in. They don't even know why they're listening so intently. It's because your words carry divine frequency. You're tuned to something higher. And when your spirit is tuned to heaven, your voice starts to echo in hearts long after you've walked away. And here's what's wild. This weight doesn't always feel glamorous. It's heavy. It comes with responsibility because the same voice that can build can also break. The same tongue that can heal can also harm. And when you're dangerously anointed, you don't get the luxury of careless speech. You start to realize that your mouth is a gate, not a garbage dump. You don't say everything you feel. You speak what builds, what shifts, what aligns, because your words don't just float, they land, and they plant seeds that grow. Think about it. How many times has someone misunderstood your silence, but you knew that if you spoke, something in the room would change? That's not arrogance, that's awareness. You've seen how your words can bring peace in chaos. You've seen how they can settle arguments without shouting. You've seen how they can correct without condemnation. That's the weight you carry. And it's not because you're perfect, it's because you're chosen. People often come to you for advice, not because you have all the answers, but because your words feel like alignment. You might not even say much, but when you do, it feels like light breaking through fog. And sometimes it surprises even you. You walk away wondering, where did that come from? It came from the well inside you. The deep reservoir God has been filling through your pain, your process, your obedience. That's why your words hit differently, because they're forged in the fire of experience. Remember the last time someone said, "You don't even know what that meant to me." They weren't being dramatic. They were recognizing the anointing in you, the supernatural flow that turned your casual comment into a prophetic confirmation. That moment you affirmed someone's dream and it woke something up in them, that wasn't just encouragement, it was activation. Because your words don't just motivate, they move people into destiny. And sometimes that way can feel isolating because people expect you to always say the right thing, to always have a word, to always have peace. But what they don't see is how much pressure you carry to protect your voice. They don't see the nights you pray before you speak, the times you stay silent just to avoid releasing something that could shift the room in the wrong direction. They don't see how much you value your gift, not because it makes you better, but because it makes you responsible. You begin to see speech as sacred. You become mindful of idle chatter. Gossip no longer entertains you. Cynicism doesn't sit well with your spirit. Negativity feels like poison in your mouth because the anointing you carry demands discipline. And when your words build nations, you don't waste them on nonsense. Even at work, your voice carries weight. You offer a solution in a meeting and suddenly everyone listens. You speak up in a tense moment and peace settles. You share a vision and people feel stirred. That's not charisma. That's calling. That's oil. That's the evidence of being dangerously anointed. And let's talk about timing. Have you noticed how the right word seems to find you at the right moment? Someone needs encouragement, and the phrase just drops in your spirit. A friend's about to make a destructive choice, and you feel the urgency to speak. A team is confused, and your words bring clarity. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. You are God's mouthpiece in motion, and your voice has become a vessel of breakthrough. That's why your silence also speaks. Because when you don't say anything, people notice. They feel the absence of your insight. Your presence alone carries counsel. Your stillness is loud. Your gaze is weighty. And that's the mark of someone whose voice has been forged by God. You're not speaking just to be heard. You're speaking to heal, to build, to deliver, to align. You're not just throwing words around. You're shaping atmospheres with sentences. You're unlocking potential with phrases. You're calling purpose out of people with declarations they didn't know they needed. Because when you're dangerously anointed, your voice is not just a sound. It's a sword. It cuts through confusion. It pierces darkness. It separates fear from faith. It dismantles lies. It restores hope. It activates movement. It carries weight because your spirit is aligned with something eternal. And when your spirit is aligned, your speech becomes an instrument of divine interruption in a world full of noise. You feel the burden to lead without permission. You feel the burden to lead without permission. You didn't ask for it. You didn't sign up for it. Yet every room you walk into seems to pull leadership out of you. You're not the loudest voice in the room, but somehow people turn to you for direction. You could be the newest hire in the office, yet people ask you what to do next. You could be in a group project, and without being assigned, you're the one organizing, strategizing, and clarifying confusion. You didn't force it. It found you. Leadership, real leadership, is never about position. It's about posture, and your posture speaks volumes. People can feel when someone carries vision, not just opinion. They sense when someone isn't just taking up space, but is cultivating progress. That's why your voice breaks through the noise. You carry the blueprint even when others don't see the structure yet. You have eyes for strategy, a heart for people, and a mind that doesn't rest until order is restored. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. You feel things other people overlook. You walk into chaos and immediately sense what needs to change. You step into broken systems and feel the weight of making them better. Even when no one gave you the title, even when they're not paying you for it. That's the burden of being dangerously anointed. You can't unsee what's wrong. You can't ignore dysfunction. And the more you grow, the heavier the responsibility becomes. Because with spiritual leadership, the calling always shows up before the confirmation. It's frustrating sometimes, isn't it? watching people in charge, but they're out of touch, seeing decisions made that are rooted in ego, not wisdom. And you sit silently knowing exactly what could fix it, but you're not charged. And yet, when things fall apart, they come to you. They ask for clarity, they ask for guidance, they ask for peace, because they know deep down the oil is on you. You're the thermostat in the room, not the thermometer. You don't just reflect the temperature, you set it. You feel it even in your family. You might be the youngest or the one with no formal authority, but you're the glue. When conflict breaks out, they call you. When someone's sick, they look to you to pray. When there's no plan, they expect you to create one. Not because you said, follow me, but because your life says there's a better way. You don't demand leadership. You attract it with integrity, with consistency, with insight. And here's what makes it even more powerful. You lead when it's uncomfortable. You don't wait for recognition. You don't wait for applause. You lead because the burden won't leave you alone. You can't sleep at night knowing something's off, and you have the answer. You don't step up for clout. You step up because chaos offends your spirit. You were built to bring alignment. You were built to bring order. You were built to carry the weight of leadership even when no one acknowledges it. There are moments when you question it. Why me? Why do I always see the problem? Why do I always have to be the one to fix it? But the truth is, God wired you for solutions. He hardwired you with vision. He gave you the eyes to see ahead while others are still stuck in what is. That's why certain conversations bore you. You've already outgrown small talk. Your thinking system structures legacy. You don't just see a building, you see a blueprint. You don't just see a team, you see capacity. You don't just see people, you see potential. That kind of sight is dangerous. It sets you apart. It makes you feel like an outsider in rooms full of surface level chatter. It causes tension because you're not satisfied with pretending. You want progress, you want purpose, you want transformation. That's why you often feel the weight of leadership before the title. Because leadership is not given by man, it's drawn out by heaven. And heaven sees what's in you even when others don't. You start realizing that your prayers are changing too. You're not just praying for open doors. You're praying for wisdom, for restraint, for discernment, for patience, because you know that true leadership isn't about proving your power. It's about mastering your posture. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop competing. You start stewarding. You stop begging to be seen. You start preparing to be trusted. Even in everyday life, your leadership shows. You walk into a store and help someone you don't know. You're in a crisis and you keep calm while others panic. You walk your friends through breakups, layoffs, diagnoses, and somehow they leave your presence with hope, not because you had a script, but because you had the strength to stand in the gap. That's what dangerous anointing looks like. It's inconvenient, it's heavy, it's costly, but it's also undeniable. And when you look at your life, you'll notice a pattern. You keep being placed in positions where leadership is required, even when it's not requested. You keep being pushed into places where vision is needed, even when you're not invited to the table. But you show up anyway, not to take over, but to take ownership, because leaders don't need permission to lead. They just need purpose. And you've got it. You carry peace in the middle of chaos. There's a certain calmness you carry that makes people wonder. While others are shaking, pacing, panicking, you're still. You're composed. It's not because your life is easier. It's not because everything always works in your favor. In fact, you've been through enough storms to drown 3 people, and yet here you are, still standing, still smiling, still speaking life into others. You don't panic under pressure, because pressure is where you were formed. You don't lose your mind in crisis, because crisis is where your character was carved. There's something about you that silences storms, not just the ones around you, but the ones inside others. People call you when things go wrong, not just for answers, but for your presence. Your presence calms them. Your tone softens the tension. Your words break the grip of fear. You're like a walking refuge. Even when you don't know what to say, just being in the room shifts the energy. That's not ordinary. That's divine. You've probably walked into rooms where conflict was brewing, and without trying, everything settled. You didn't even say much. Maybe a smile. Maybe a question that no one else thought to ask. Maybe you just stood there and listened. But whatever you did, peace entered with you. It's not that you ignore problems. It's that you refuse to let problems dictate your posture. You're not controlled by chaos. You command it. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with water, with presence, with clarity, with the kind of spirit that refuses to let anxiety win. You've been in situations where everything screamed for panic. Deadlines were collapsing. People were yelling. Everything was falling apart. But in the midst of the storm, your spirit stayed grounded. You took a deep breath and said, let's figure this out. And somehow everyone followed your lead. That's what happens when you carry peace. You don't need a title to lead. You lead with your energy. You lead with your stability. You lead with your unshakable calm. Think about it. How many times have you been the one holding it all together while others fell apart? How many times have you had to wipe your own tears in private just so you could be the strong one in public? How many times have you encouraged others while you were secretly hurting? That's not weakness. That's strength in disguise. That's divine resilience. That's what it means to be dangerously anointed. Your strength doesn't make sense to people who haven't seen your scars. You've walked through grief, but you didn't lose your joy. You faced betrayal, but you didn't lose your ability to trust. You've been through financial strain, emotional exhaustion, relational trauma, and somehow peace still lives in you. That peace isn't fake. It's not forced. It's fought for. You wrestled for that peace. You went through nights of crying out and mornings of dragging yourself out of bed just to keep going. And now that peace is your weapon. It protects your mind. It guards your heart. It anchors your soul. When you carry peace, you stop reacting to everything. You don't jump into drama. You don't match energy. You set the tone. People can be loud around you, but they won't stay loud for long. You don't play their game. You invite them to your level. That's why some people don't know how to handle you. They're used to triggering others. They're used to chaos, breeding more chaos. But when they try it with you, it goes nowhere. You're not easily shaken. You've been through too much. You know too much. You've seen what panic produces, and you've made a decision to choose peace every time. Even in traffic, even in long lines, even in frustrating meetings, while others are complaining and fuming, you find something to be grateful for. Not because you're naive, but because you've trained your spirit to look for purpose, not problems. You don't see interruptions as attacks. You see them as opportunities for growth, for reflection, for recalibration. That's why you're unbothered by things that used to wreck you. Your peace has been paid for, and you won't let just anything rob you of it. And here's the truth. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of confidence. Confidence that you are being kept. Confidence that things will work out. Confidence that you are not alone. That's why your peace is dangerous. It defies logic. It confuses enemies. It silences critics. Baffles people who expected you to fall apart. It makes them wonder how you keep showing up, how you keep forgiving, how you keep loving, how you keep building. It's because you've tapped into something deeper than circumstances. You've anchored yourself in the eternal, not the temporary. Peace like yours doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't push, it guides. It doesn't demand the spotlight. It becomes the stillness in the storm that holds everything together. You walk into the room and the room exhales. You speak and confusion clears. You listen and people feel seen. You pray and atmospheres shift. Your peace is a ministry all by itself. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to be, because when you show up, peace shows up too. That's why even in your silence, people feel better. You don't even have to explain yourself anymore. Your life speaks, your demeanor speaks, your smile, your patience, your quiet strength. It all testifies to a power greater than you. You're not just calm, you're called. You're not just composed, you're covered. You're not just peaceful, you're powerful. So here you are, unshaken, unbothered, and undeniably chosen. Not because life has been easy, but because the fire forged something in you that the storm couldn't steal. You don't just carry peace, you are peace. You don't just bring calm, you embody calm. Your spirit has been through battles that nobody clapped for, victories that nobody witnessed, and moments where you had to encourage yourself just to take one more step forward. But through it all, you kept showing up, you kept leading, you kept standing. And that, my friend, is not ordinary. That is destiny walking. You are the proof that scars don't stop purpose. You are the evidence that pressure doesn't break everyone. Some of us become diamonds. You didn't just survive, you transcended. You didn't just make it through the valley, you built a trail so others could follow. That's why you feel the weight. That's why your spirit wrestles with things others ignore. That's why you can't settle for mediocrity, because you were never meant to blend in. You were born to shift atmospheres. And now the world can't ignore what God hid inside of you. You are the storm in the stillness. You are the voice in the wilderness, the fire in the furnace, the calm in the crisis. You don't chase recognition, you chase results. And while others are trying to look anointed, you're out here living it, breathing it, bleeding for it. That's what makes you dangerous, because your anointing isn't loud, it's loud in the spirit. It breaks things, it shifts things, it wakes people up from spiritual sleep. You were never designed to be comfortable. You were designed to be called. That's why your life doesn't fit in everyone's box. That's why they don't always understand you. That's why you had to walk alone sometimes. Because God was building something in private that the world will only recognize in public when it's fully matured. You were hidden, not forgotten, buried, not broken, planted, not punished. You are walking proof that peace isn't passive, it's power. That silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That humility isn't smallness, it's strength under control. You don't clap back, not because you couldn't, but because you've learned to let your fruit speak louder than your frustration. That's why your presence irritates demons. That's why insecure people get uncomfortable around you, because your stillness speaks. Your discipline offends laziness. Your progress convicts comfort zones. You didn't come to impress, you came to impact. There's a line that says, heavy is the head that wears the crown. But I tell you this, honored is the soul that carries the oil. And you, my friend, carry oil, not the kind that makes you flashy, but the kind that makes you effective, the kind that sets captives free, the kind that destroys yokes, the kind that breaks generational cycles without saying a word. That oil didn't come cheap. It cost you comfort, it cost you friends, it cost you sleep, but it gave you power. So let them wonder, let them gossip, let them question how you do it. Smile, keep building, keep showing up with excellence, because real power doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself through results. And your life is about to scream results. You're about to step into rooms you didn't apply for. You're about to be seated at tables you weren't even invited to. Because when favor speaks, credentials fall silent. Don't shrink. Don't apologize for your growth. Don't water down your anointing to make others feel safe. You weren't called to keep people comfortable. You were called to make dry bones live. So prophecy with your presence, preach with your peace, speak with your stillness. You don't need to be loud to be legendary. You just need to be consistent. Let your silence thunder. Let your stillness roar. You are not just anointed. You are dangerously anointed. And that means everything attached to you will flourish. Everything around you will shift. Everything you touch will multiply. You are not here to take sides. You are here to take territory. This is your season, not to explain yourself, but to express your power, not to prove your worth, but to walk in it. The stage is set. The oil is on you. Now walk like the crown fits. Speak like the world's listening. Live like heaven is backing you, because it is.